It was 1964. Bob Dylan captured and described in his song, "The times they are a-changing." President Kennedy had just been assassinated in November of '63. Many youth in America disapproved of the war in Vietnam, and that they were forced to fight it. There was a philosophical difference developing in social movements that had started with the beatniks and now was gaining momentum with people like Bob Dylan and his good friend Ken Kesey. They felt American society was constraining, that it told people how to think, what to do, how to do it, and held little tolerance to an acceptable mindset. This change was more about self-expression, freedom, and choosing one's own path. Ken Kesey has been called father of the hippies and father of counterculture. His parties, get-togethers, and communes were legendary. His closest of friends followed him nearly everywhere, often stayed in his home, and were known as the Merry Pranksters. Kesey in the early 1960s achieved fame for his book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In 1964, his novel, Once a Great Notion, was being published. Kesey and the Pranksters would drive from La Honda, California, just west of San Francisco, to New York City for the publishing. He had been part of the CIA drug trials, which experimented with LSD, mescaline, marijuana, and other drugs. LSD was legal at the time. Kesey then believed the drug opened up consciousness to a whole new reality and promoted it. To many of the bohemian movements, such as the Lost Generation, the Beatniks, Ken Kesey, and the Hippies, a trip, or traveling, was viewed as the exploration of other things, an expansion of one's mind. It was a classroom of life. For the New York trip, Kesey purchased a 1939 International Harvester school bus. They named it Furthur, which would stand for several things. It meant going beyond the realms of reality. It meant the journey of life, the search for meaning and purpose, to never stop learning and growing, to strive for a better future, and that there was more to life than the status quo, or what society's values were. When the bus was ready for the trip, it had bunk beds, a bathroom, a kitchen, with refrigerator, a stove, a generator, a sound system, with interior and exterior intercoms, a railing and seating platform on the roof of the bus. Another platform was welded to the rear to hold the generator and the motorcycle. I mentioned previously that I attended one of Ken Kesey's parties. This wasn't the LSD-fueled ones of his past, but was put on by his son, and it simply had just beer, or at least as far as I knew. Ken approached me as I was admiring Furthur, and we had a conversation. The bus was a true work of art, truly an original. It was painted by the various Merry Pranksters in a variety of psychedelic colors and designs in day-glow paint. There were swirling patterns, psychedelic animals, abstract shapes, and a number of symbols. The symbols represented peace, love, freedom, and anti-materialism. It told the story of their desire for a world of much greater equality, one free from the constraints of society, to open up a new perspective by expanding their minds with psychedelic drugs like LSD. Other themes were the connectiveness of all of humanity and nature. Kesey felt his creativity in writing had not, as of late, been where it needed to be, and he then turned to filmmaking to revamp his writing. He combined this with the mind-opening experience of being on the road. His thoughts of the journey were influenced by beatnik Jack Kerouac's novel, On the Road. The drive from La Honda, California to New York City would be a film. Each of the Merry Pranksters would take on a character and stay in character the whole trip. This was with a core of 14 of the Merry Pranksters. They, of course, consumed a lot of LSD and smoked a lot of marijuana. The driver of the bus was Neal Cassady, who I will go over with the other Merry Pranksters later in this episode. They often had between 20 and 40 people on the bus. It would take them 3 months to get to New York, and on the way back, they would need a month. People would line up along the street to wave and get a glimpse of Furthur, the magic bus, which was shocking to all viewers. Some of the beatnik writers, such as Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, had moved back to New York from San Francisco. Kerouac and Ginsberg had been friends with Kesey while they lived in the North Beach part of San Francisco. The Merry Pranksters would visit them and also meet with Timothy Leary, who had done the well-known LSD experiments while a professor at Harvard University. Tom Wolfe wrote the book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, published in 1968, which was about this New York trip. A film called The Magic Trip, released in 2011, is a compilation of film Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters took while on the trip. It is currently being turned into a film by Gus Van Sant, who also did the films Good Will Hunting, Finding Forrester, Milk, and others. When the trip was completed, Kesey and the Merry Pranksters returned to Kesey's La Honda home and would throw parties, handing out, of course, LSD, and would show footage from their cross-country trip. A short while later, they began the concept of the acid test. This was a challenge to see if one could handle the LSD trips. This began first at Kesey's home. Then they would take it out on the road with their bus Furthur, traveling up and down the West Coast. They would hold these acid tests at public forums to as much as 10,000 people. While they journeyed around, putting on the public acid test in a small way, they would also do them from Furthur. The Grateful Dead would play both at the acid test and the smaller ones on Furthur. Tripping was a documentary done in 1999 about Kesey and his times with the Merry Pranksters. Tripping interviewed writer Hunter S. Thompson, Marianne Faithfull, who was singer, ex-girlfriend of the Rolling Stones' Mick Jagger, singer Fatboy Slim, and others. In 2014, for the 50th year anniversary, a 75-day trip covering 15,000 miles was taken with Furthur along with a group of new Merry Pranksters. A documentary about the trip going Furthur was released in 2016. Among the things they visited were 6 music festivals and Burning Man, a positive message about a reminder we are all on a journey. Burning Man is a 9-day festival deep in the northern Nevada desert, far from the closest town. The event began in 1986 and is described as a promotion of radical self-expression, anti-materialism, anti-capitalism, and anti-corporate. However, it is also attended by many of the Silicon Valley founders and leaders. In 2022, 80,000 attended the main event in Nevada. There were also 23 local events on top of that. The Merry Pranksters were a group of exceptionally talented creatives. Neal Cassady would meet, befriend, and become part of the Beatniks while they were at Columbia University in New York. He later became a Merry Prankster with Ken Kesey. He was the inspiration for one of the main characters, Dean Moriarty, in Kerouac's book, On the Road. Kerouac and Ginsberg would several times use Cassady as the character in their novels. Hunter S. Thompson, Tom Wolfe, Charles Bukowski, Ken Kesey, John Cleland Holmes, Robert Stone, and many other writers would write about Cassady in their books or characters based on him. A number of films have done the same, including major motion pictures. He is mentioned in numerous popular songs. I know of no one like this who has been featured as often as Neal has in literature, film and song. Jack Nicholson's character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was also based on Cassady, as well as was the musical group U2 Bono's character in the film Across the Universe. All in all, his character has been used dozens of times in film, novels, and songs. Del Close, a merry prankster who was a comedian and taught comedy to some of America's greatest comedians, including Bill Murray, Tina Fey, John Belushi, John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Vince Vaughn, Gilda Radner, Harold Ramis, Chris Farley, and dozens of other big names. Stuart Brand, another merry prankster, was a Stanford-trained biologist who developed the Whole Earth Catalog, said to be the first search engine. Apple founder Steve Jobs compared the Whole Earth Catalog to Google. The Grateful Dead, who played at the Kesey events, would go on and sell 35 million albums. As their lead singer, Jerry Garcia, would do 2,300 concerts in 30 years. As many as 40,000 of their fans, called Deadheads, would follow them from concert to concert and live in makeshift villages outside the stadium in which they would play. I attended one of the Grateful Dead concerts, visited the Deadhead village, and can say it was absolutely fascinating. There was a peacefulness to it that I have not experienced at any other event. Many of the Deadheads were unable to get tickets and would enjoy hearing the concert from their village. Kesey mellowed out after spending time in jail during 1966 for being caught with marijuana. He would move back to Eugene, Oregon, and his house would become an artist-writer commune. He was done with his days of wild LSD parties and would miss the defining events in the creation of the hippie movement. He would allow Furthur to be taken by the Merry Pranksters to the main hippie events, such as the Human Being, the Monterey Festival, Woodstock, and the Summer of Love. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and like, as that is how YouTube decides to send it on to others or not. Have a great day, and see you in the next episode.